You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar.
And I'm Adya Juneja, and on the show today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has claimed that Iran no longer has the capacity to enrich uranium or manufacture ballistic missiles nearly 3 weeks into the US-Israeli war, adding that Israel is doing its best to propagate cracks in Iran's leadership.
Of course, we'll get you all the details on that. Also on the show, the White House is pushing for an additional $200 billion for the Iran war. And this as President Donald Trump warns of a volatile world and the need to replenish depleted ammunition. Now, the Pentagon says the conflict has already cost $11.3 billion in just first week. We'll get you all the details on that. Let's begin with the headlines.
Italy, Germany and France rule out providing any immediate military aid without a truce in West Asia. They are part of 7 American allied nations who earlier said they are ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran today has no ability to enrich uranium, and it has no ability to produce ballistic missiles.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims Israel and US are winning the war, with Iran losing its ability to enrich uranium or produce ballistic missiles. Netanyahu says he sees war ending a lot faster than people think.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel acted alone in striking Iran's South Pars field. Say he will now heed US President Donald Trump's call not to repeat attacks on key Iranian energy sites.
Sirens sound in Jerusalem as Iran launches multiple rounds of missiles towards Israel after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared Iran has been decimated. IDF says it identified 3 rounds of missile fire in just an hour and a half.
US media reports say an American US F-35 stealth warplane was hit by suspected Iranian fire and made an emergency landing at American Air Base in West Asia. Earlier, Iran's IRGC had released a footage reportedly showing the jet being in the air.
That's a small price to pay to make sure that we stay tippy-top.
U.S. President Donald Trump confirms he's seeking $200 billion in new Pentagon funding, calling it a small price to pay to equip the military.
Surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay?
US President Donald Trump draws a parallel between US strikes on Iran and Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor decades ago as he hosts Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi at White House.
Asian markets slipped on Friday after overnight losses on Wall Street as West Asia tensions pushed oil prices higher and rattled investors while metals tumbled. Despite calming signals from Trump and Netanyahu, sentiment remains cautious.
A federal arts commission approves final design for a 24-karat gold coin bearing President Donald Trump's image to commemorate America's 250th birth anniversary.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims that Israel and US are winning the war.
as Iran is being decimated. In a press conference, Netanyahu said that he sees the war ending much earlier than people expect, while denying that he dragged US into the war.
Since the start of the war 20 days ago, we are winning and Iran is being decimated. Iran's missile and drone arsenal is being massively degraded and will be destroyed. And I want to close these opening remarks with one other fake news, and that is that Israel somehow dragged the US into a conflict with Iran. Does anyone really think that someone can tell President Trump what to do? Come on.
Netanyahu also claimed that Iran no longer has the capacity to enrich uranium or make ballistic missile after 20 days of U.S. Israeli air attacks.
We are now taking action not only to destroy the remaining ballistic missiles and nuclear programs, there is little left, but also to destroy the industries that enable the production of these programs. And already now, after 20 days, I can tell you, Iran no longer has the capacity to enrich uranium and manufacture ballistic missiles.
The Israeli Prime Minister hailed his cooperation with US President Donald Trump and suggested that he saw this war ending a lot faster than people think. But he did not provide a specific time frame.
See that as a real change that will follow this war. But I also see this war ending a lot faster than people think. I think you have to, in war, you have to grit your teeth.
Netanyahu clarified that Israel acted alone against the Escalation gas field in Iran's South Pars. U.S. President Donald Trump had earlier indicated that he did not know in advance about Israel's strike on gas field. While Netanyahu said that Israel was holding off strikes after Trump told him not to hit Iranian gas fields.
Israel acted alone against the Escalation gas compound. Fact number two, President Trump asked us to hold off on future attacks, and we're holding out. I don't think any two leaders have been as coordinated as President Trump and I. He's the leader. I'm, his ally.
Netanyahu also asserted that any Iranian attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz would fail. He said that Iran is trying to blackmail the world by closing a key international maritime route.
I think that what has to be done is to have alternative routes. Instead of going through the choke points of the Hormuz Straits and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, in order to have the flow of oil, just have oil pipelines, gas pipelines, going west through the Arabian Peninsula, right up to Israel, right up to our Mediterranean ports, and you've just done away with the choke points forever.
The Israeli Prime Minister suggested that it is too early to say whether the Iranian people will take advantage of the conditions that Israel has created for them to go out on the streets. He, however, added that Israel was only a catalyst, and in the end, it all depended on the Iranian people. All right, we're now to discuss more. Are being joined by Adrian Kalmel, fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute, terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar, and also the author of forthcoming book on Hezbollah. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on our broadcast. Adrian, let's begin with the big news. Now, of course, the White House is looking forward for $200 billion for this particular war. Do you think it's a small price to pay, as Trump says?
First of all, good morning to you, Josna, and pleasure to be here. That's a great question. This is one of these situations where I do think it's reasonable. I think look at the money that's put into the Ukraine conflict that's just essentially turned into a quagmire that hasn't gone anywhere. The Islamic Republic and what the threat that they pose in the coming years, months to coming years to come, was really terrifying for all of us who watch this very closely. And we always knew that we were going to have to endure some short-term pain to make sure that we don't have the long-term suffering that the region And look, I predicted quite likely the world would have to face with a nuclear-armed Iran that's aligned with both Moscow and Beijing. So it's just something that we couldn't afford to happen. And we'll see if that money's needed, but it's always good to be prepared for these type of issues.
Right, Adrian, and do you think, is this a shift towards direct regime change, messaging on, how Netanyahu had spoken about this in his speech? Do you think it's like a direct regime change?
Yeah, I've always said right from the beginning, and this is just from reading the Iranian people and the actions that they've taken over the since roughly January of 2018, they've been in revolt. And I've said that Khamenei had a choice between his nuclear program or saving his regime. And Khamenei always knew that the greatest threat to his regime wasn't the Israelis, it wasn't the Americans, it was the Iranian people. So the U.S. and Israeli program was to remove their nuclear weapons and or capacity to enrich, reprocess ballistic missiles. But really, the outcome, once they got into it, and you start to degrade their military capabilities and their leadership capabilities at multiple levels, the outcome was always looking like regime change.
And just to take that question forward, is it actually a possibility, considering the fact that 3 weeks into the war, or more than three weeks now, do you think that's actually a possibility? We know that Moshtaba Khamenei is, of course, he's not come on camera. We do not know. There have been doubts about if he's alive or not, but we haven't really heard anything from there. And do you think the Iranian regime as a hierarchy is that easy to topple?
There are a lot of people that think that it's difficult, that they spent so many years building these structures. What we do have to understand is that there are some key individuals that are sitting in places that have built relationships over the course of 40 years and risen to the top of these positions, whether it's Ismail Kataib, head of MOIS, or the Ministry of Intelligence Services, or whether it's Ali Laranjani. Once they get removed, and I'll kind of give you a kind of an example, taking out Qasem Soleimani, you saw how difficult that was, and the regime never regained its capabilities as far as its proxies and its ability to exert pressure when Soleimani was released. And so this is creating a lot of fissures, structural. I would say weaknesses are being exacerbated at this point. And I've seen videos of besieged, the ground, the individuals on the ground hiding underneath an overpass, waving a white flag, saying, "Listen, we're done. We don't want to do this." And quite frankly, they're the people that they're the lowest paid individuals. They're the ones gaining the paychecks, and they're the one that have been told to go out and kill people, while the people at the top have been rich, and they're done with this. So I do think, and I'll make one more point. It's been something that hasn't been mentioned, and it's because they haven't been targeted. Is the Iranian army, the Artesh. There is a day after plan, I hear, to look at the Artesh, to say, okay, that can be our security forces. They're not tied to the regime. They've never been really friendly with the regime, rather antagonistic, and they're looking for defections. Also, hitting of infrastructure. I think that's why Trump was like, don't hit the South Pars oil field. It's the day after plan. So again, regime change, looking at making sure that there's a force in place to stabilize, and also the economic backbones are still there and can be rehabilitated and rebuilt.
Right, and let's get to the vital waterway which has been blocked by Iran. How do you think, how vulnerable is the Strait of Hormuz right now, basically?
It is another great question. It's going to be vulnerable from what we can see right now are from drone attacks. both aerial and surface drones, meaning boats just programmed in to hit certain tankers, and possible mining of the straits. These things can be dealt with, but the drone warfare has certainly put a element of discomfort for clearing up the Strait of Hormuz. As far as a navy, for the regime to actually close it off, they can't do that. It's making sure that all those missile launchers that are stationed around there, that they are taken out, and then that they don't have the ability to still launch drones and even use speedboats, which they use, the bog hammers. And we're doing low fly overflights with something called the old Warthog. It's an airplane that just they were planning on putting it out of date, but it's very useful for patrolling the Hormuz Straits there. So as I see the kinetic actions start to wind down over parts of Iran, we'll see an increased response. And America's been moving more assets into the region as well.
Also talking about the other region that's in conflict, that is Lebanon. Now, the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, he has had this talk with the French foreign minister, looking forward for a kind of a ceasefire or peace effort between Hezbollah and Israel. Is that a possibility anytime soon, or we see that Israel is adamant on eliminating Hezbollah and we will see the conflict go even more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from my best estimates, what I heard well before October 7th of 2023, when the Israeli war planning was, next time there's a war in the north, meaning a war with Hezbollah, they're not going to just stop at the Litani. They're just going to take care of Hezbollah. I mean, they're trying to work with the United Nations. They're trying to work with the Lebanese government, but the Lebanese government, they lack the capacity and or the will to do anything about it, even in Hezbollah's weakened position. The LAF has not been helpful in the situation. A lot of times they're seated with members of Hezbollah. So, it's one of these situations where Israel sees, they see the opportunity here, and both with the head of the snake in Tehran and then their number one surrogate sitting in Beirut. So I don't expect it to wind down there.
Also, another element that's Russia has now, of course, interfered because there has been an attack on an RTTV reporter that we heard of, and Russia has now condemned this. Do you think that somehow these tensions between Russia and Israel will escalate, and how do you think that will go forward with?
I do think that will simmer down to a certain degree. One of the dirty little secrets about during the Syrian civil war was when the Islamic Republic was trying to run all their precision-guided missiles across the land bridge to Lebanon over to Hezbollah. The Israelis carried over 200 airstrikes, and the Russians, every time they would carry out an airstrike, they call the Russians in and say, listen, we see something here that's threatening our stability. Do we have overflight rights? And yeah, they give it to them and grant it to them and hit them. I think this will get paved over. This could be a broader effort to put pressure on Israel vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic, but I don't expect it to have much staying power.
Well, Adrian, of course, we'll have to look forward to how this all evolves, because the current situation doesn't look like it's going to simmer down any soon. And looking at the kind of budget, that $200 billion, it looks like that's actually stretching even more. And with, of course, another ship traveling from Okinawa in Japan to West Asian region, of course, we'll be bringing you again to analyze that as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, as always.
Well, we'll be right back after a short break, but don't go anywhere. Coming up on World DNA Next, U.S. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard has outlined that U.S. and Israel don't share the same end goal when it comes to Iran. We'll tell you more on this after a short break. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Of course, we begin with the Strait of Hormuz. At least 7 major international powers, all known as American allies, have offered help to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
But 3 of them now say that any military aid will come only after the ceasefire.
Well, in a joint statement on Thursday, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the Netherlands said that they are ready to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. They were later joined by Canada. The statement came after U.S. President Donald Trump rallied against allies for declining to help secure the strait and warned that a failure to do so could undermine the future of NATO.
The 6 nations expressed their support for a potential coalition to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for commercial ships and oil tankers. However, the joint statement fell short of stating any commitment to send naval vessels or other resources. Later, Italy, Germany and France made it clear that they are not talking about any immediate military help, but rather a potential multilateral initiative after a ceasefire.
In peacetime, a fifth of global crude oil and liquefied natural gas passed through the Strait of Hormuz, but an effective Iranian blockade of the strait has paralyzed commercial shipping through the crucial maritime choke point. 23 commercial vessels, including 10 tankers, have reported incidents or having been attacked. According to the International Maritime Organization, around 20,000 seafarers are stranded on approximately 3,200 vessels west of the strait.
President Trump has urged other world powers and NATO to help reopen the Hormuz Strait, but they have been rebuffed his call in the short term while insisting they were open to discussions and planning.
Italy's Defense Minister Guido Crosetto said the joint statement should not be seen as a war mission, and in Berlin, Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has said that any German military involvement would depend on the situation after a ceasefire. He added that the military involvement would also require approval by the German parliament.
French President Emmanuel Macron told reporters his country planned to sound out permanent members of the UN Security Council on the possibility of establishing a UN framework for future plans once the ongoing exchange of fire had ended to secure navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
And well, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tainani sent us this report from New York. Let's listen in.
7 U.S. allies issued a joint statement backing a potential coalition to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a major sign that the White House is still trying to rally international support as the shipping crisis deepens. The group condemned Iran's attack on commercial vessels and energy infrastructure and said that they're ready to contribute to efforts to ensure safe passage. But the statement stopped short of any concrete military pledge or commitment, and several of those countries have already ruled out sending naval forces. The diplomatic timing also stood out. Japan joined at the last minute as Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi was in Washington for talks with President Trump. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz now matters far beyond what happens across the Middle East, because any prolonged disruption there hits global energy markets, trade, and inflation more than it already has. Susan Tahrwani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
U.S. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard has outlined that U.S. and Israel don't share the same end goal when it comes to Iran.
And during a hearing in front of the House Intelligence Committee, Gabbard claimed that the objectives that have been laid out by the president are different from the objectives that have been laid out by the Israeli government.
Stating different goals, Gabbard added, and I'm quoting her here, "We can see through the operations that the Israeli government has been focused on disabling the Iranian leadership. The president has stated that his objectives are to destroy Iran's ballistic missiles launching capability, their ballistic missile production capability, and their navy."
On his part, U.S. President, during his meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, stated he was not sending ground troops to Iran weeks after he launched massive missile and bombing attacks alongside Israel. The president also said that he specifically instructed Israel not to hit oil and gas fields.
The development comes as Israel bombed Iran's South Pars gas field, which supplies around 70% of the country's domestic natural gas.
The Islamic Republic's Military Operational Command has vowed to destroy West Asian region's energy infrastructure if its facilities are targeted by U.S. and Israel again.
At least 7 tankers carrying Russian oil
and we'll be slipping into a very short break on World DNA. On the other side, at least 7 tankers carrying Russian oil that were originally headed to China have reportedly changed course, and according to reports, they are now sailing towards India. We'll get you all the details on that on the other side of this very short break. Stay tuned. You're watching WION The World.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics, more than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION. World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.
Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One, and this is World DNA with me, Adya and Josna. Let's start with the headlines we're tracking for you.
You can't do it only from the air. You can do a lot of things from the air, and we're doing. but there has to be a ground component as well.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggests a ground operation in Iran would be needed to overthrow the regime, saying it can't be done only from air.
Italy, Germany and France rule out providing any immediate military aid without a truce in West Asia. They are part of 7 American allied nations who earlier said they are ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Siren sound in Jerusalem as Iran launches multiple rounds of missiles towards Israel after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared Iran has been decimated. IDF says it identified 3 rounds of missile fire in just an hour and a half.
US media reports say an American US F-35 stealth warplane was hit by suspected Iranian fire and made an emergency landing at American Air Base in West Asia. Earlier, Iran's IRGC had released a footage reportedly showing the jet being in the air.
That's a small price to pay to make sure that we stay tippy-top.
US President Donald Trump confirms he is seeking $200 billion in new Pentagon funding, calling it a small price to pay to equip the military.
Surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay?
US President Donald Trump draws a parallel between US strikes on Iran and Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor decades ago as he hosts Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi at White House.
U.S. gasoline prices have surged more than 30% since the West Asia conflict began, nearing $4 a gallon. Analysts say supply fears are pushing oil higher, with more increases likely in the weeks ahead.
A federal arts commission approves final design for a 24-carat gold coin bearing President Donald Trump's image to commemorate America's 250th birth anniversary.
We have some breaking news coming in right now. There are reports of a new missile attack that is coming from across the Persian Gulf region.
The United Arab Emirates Interior Ministry said that it is responding to missile attacks.
The Kuwait's army has also said its air defenses are intercepting projectiles. And elsewhere in the Gulf, Bahrain Interior Ministry has said that air raid signs were activated in the country.
Well, it said that a fire erupted in a company warehouse after shrapnel fell. And Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said it had intercepted a drone in the country's east.
This, of course, coming as Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, had declared that all the facilities or Iran has been decimated. But we have seen retaliation coming in from Iran on the Gulf region. And there are reports of new missile attack coming in from across the Persian Gulf. The United Arab Emirates Interior Ministry has said that it is responding to these missile attacks, while Kuwait's army has also said that its air defenses are intercepting projectiles.
While we are still waiting on official confirmation regarding the origin of these projectiles, the coordinated nature of these reports from Kuwait down to the UAE suggests a significant escalation in regional tensions.
Now, Bahrain has also reacted. Interior Ministry has said that air raid stands were activated in the country. It said that a fire erupted in a company warehouse after shrapnel did fall, and Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said it had intercepted a drone in the country's east.
At least 7 tankers carrying Russian oil that were originally headed to China have reportedly changed course.
And according to reports, they are now sailing towards India. The development comes amid energy shock that fears during the ongoing West Asia war. Ship tracking data has indicated that the ship Aqua Titan is likely to dock at the New Mangalore port on 21st of March. And according to Bloomberg report, the ship Aqua Titan was originally headed for a Chinese port but turned towards India.
In addition, the Suezmax vessel Zuzu N, which is carrying Kazakh crude oil, has also rerouted towards India. Well, this is also according to the ship tracking data.
Now, despite the tense situation in the Strait of Hormuz due to the ongoing war, a few Indian ships have still been able to complete their voyages without major disruptions. But on the energy supply, India's Ministry of External Affairs has said that India is buying oil from across the world, adding that several vessels will be docking because India is buying energy.
Tankers coming from X part of the world or Y part of the world, it is normal. We'll have many more tankers coming because we are buying energy. We are buying oil, we are buying crude oil from various parts of the world, and we have a diversified resources, diversified option in this regard, and this will continue. I saw that there were a lot of news about one particular vessel, but we are buying from various sources including Russia. So, I don't know why it should become such a big news. There are several vessels which will be docking, and it's a continuous process.
Iran has shut the Strait of Hormuz to intensify pressure on the United States as well as several European allies. The disruption to shipping has stranded millions of barrels of crude oil, resulting in severe energy crisis globally.
However, despite the tense situation in the Strait of Hormuz, a few Indian ships have still been able to complete their voyages without major disruptions. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital maritime choke point that handles nearly 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil trade. Now, U.S. and Israel's war on Iran has reignited fears of a nuclear disaster.
International organizations are preparing for a worst-case scenario nuclear catastrophe due to strikes on nuclear facilities or direct use of a nuclear weapon.
Well, in an interview with U.S.-based news portal Politico, WHO's Regional Director for Eastern Mediterranean, Hanan Balki, has expressed concerns about a nuclear incident due to ongoing conflict in West Asia. She said, WHO staffers are prepared, but there is no way to escape long-term consequences of a nuclear disaster.
Well, this comes as US and Israel continue to bomb Iran's military sites, including attacks near nuclear enrichment facilities.
Now, according to Balki, WHO is training staff on how to respond during bombing or a nuclear incident. WHO has warned that any nuclear incident will have devastating and long-lasting consequences, not just for West Asia, but globally.
With fresh attacks in energy infrastructure, the threat of further escalation has intensified. Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant sits at the coastline of Persian Gulf. The International Atomic Energy Agency has issued a warning after a strike hit a compound located 350 meters from the reactor at Bushehr plant.
The agency called it a near miss, but a simple misfire could trigger irreversible nuclear disaster.
Other possible sites include Iran's known nuclear facilities like Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan. These sites were hit during July 2025 operation by Israel and United States. Well, tensions between Russia and Israel have escalated after a state TV crew suffered injuries in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon.
And Russia has condemned the airstrike as not accidental amid the ongoing Israeli military campaign and ground operations in the south of the country.
NBC Rupley, a subsidiary of the state-linked TV, posted footage showing an explosion and plumes of smoke rising through the air meters behind RT's reporter. The reporter and a cameraman were struck by shrapnel. The reporter in the visuals can be seen wearing a bulletproof vest with the sign press on it as he delivered an on-air report while the missile hit the location.
The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova took to Telegram to condemn the strike. Zakharova said, and I'm quoting, "Given the killing of 200 journalists in Gaza, today's event cannot be called accidental." She argued that the missile did not hit a strategic military facility, but targeted a specific location where a media report was being filmed.
The Russian embassy in Beirut has called for an appropriate investigation, labeling attacks on media workers as unacceptable under international law. The IDF has said it gave explicit warning of strikes on the area and does not target civilians or journalists.
ארצות הברית דונלד טראמפ דיבר על קצב התחלופה הגבוה.
Now, India's National Investigation Agency has arrested Ukrainians in Delhi and Lucknow airports after they were flagged through a routine immigration check called the C form.
Well, the C form submissions helped Indian officials spot the Ukrainian suspicious activity. These individuals were arrested on March 13th when they tried to leave India and were reportedly heading to a country in Southeast Asia. A US citizen was also detained at Kolkata airport in the same operation.
Now, the C form is a key part of India's rules for tracking foreign visitors. When a foreigner stays at a hotel or other accommodation, the host, usually the hotel, submits this online form to the government within 24 hours of the guest's arrival. It includes basic details like person's full name, passport number, nationality, visa information, and stay dates.
Indian authorities say the group was entering the northeastern state of Mizoram and accused the group of entering a restricted area that requires special permits. NIA claims that they held training sessions for ethnic armed groups on drone warfare, drone operations, assembly and jamming technology. They face charges under India's strict anti-terror law, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act or UAPA.
Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its embassy in New Delhi have strongly protested against the arrest. It called the charges orchestrated and politically motivated and have asked for consular access to the detainees. Ukraine said it expects India to handle the case with transparency, legality, and respect for international law, noting the traditionally friendly ties between the two countries.
A rare weather system is unfolding across 3 South Asian countries.
Now, from the skies over North India to the plains of Pakistan and into the mountains of Afghanistan, a colossal rain band is unleashing chaos and is triggering storms, hail, and unusual temperature drops.
This 1,000 kilometers long straight rain band starts in Afghanistan, passes through Pakistan and extends far into India. Western disturbances typically bring rain and snow from western directions during the cooler winter months. However, the current one is special not just because of the rain it carries, but also for its unique shape and the timely relief it offers to areas facing early heat this March.
Now, this straight formation is very rare, unlike the usual curved roof seen in such systems, and such shape and straight structure often builds up into intense thunderstorms with heavy rain, lightning, and strong gusty winds, something already being experienced in several regions in India.
Just days before the system moved in many parts of North India, battled unusually high temperatures for March, while in cities like Delhi, the mercury rose close to 37 degrees Celsius. The western disturbance changed that fast. It brought rain, thunderstorms, and cooler breezes that dropped temperatures by 3 degrees Celsius to 7 degrees Celsius.
The IMD predicts moderate to heavy rain with lightning and gusty winds in northwest India until March 20th. The drop in temperature has now brought relief from sweltering heat.
Jammu and Kashmir sees intermittent fresh snow accumulation of 5 to 6 inches blanketing slopes and passes. Gulmarg, Katua, Sonmarg witnessed fresh snowfall with tourists experiencing the joy of winter wonderland.
The rare western disturbance has triggered heavy rains in Pakistan's largest city overnight. Nearly 20 killed and several injured after heavy rains and strong winds lashed Karachi. Walls and roofs collapsed across multiple locations in the city. Pakistan forecasts have said that more rain and thunderstorms with strong winds and possible isolated hailstorm can continue to affect Karachi and other parts of Sindh province.
Yesterday, there was complete chaos when the storm hit. It rained heavily, there were strong storm winds, so these people were taking shelter by the walls to save themselves, and then the wall collapsed on them.
The price of oil and natural gas soared as escalating attacks in the Persian Gulf caused long-term damage to major energy facilities. The third week of the war is already reshaping the global energy market for years to come. Qatar said Iran's strike damage to its key gas plant will take years to repair.
The world now faces what appears to be the largest energy crisis in history. There is a historic divergence in oil prices across regions. Oman crude hit a record $173 per barrel on Wednesday, surpassing even the 2008 financial crisis spike. Dubai crude oil also has surged to an all-time high of above $150. This is the first time both crude prices crossed $150 a barrel. On the other hand, Brent was closing in on $120 and U.S. crude rose to over $97. Now the gap between Oman and U.S. prices now stands at over 70% or more than $70. And to put that historic divergence into context, remember the difference between all benchmarks before the Iran war was just about $5.
U.S. crude is now trading at a discount of about $20 to Brent. That is one of the largest gaps on record. Brent and U.S. crude are priced based on U.S. and European supply conditions, while the actual disruption is concentrated in West Asia. That means they do not fully capture the severity of the physical shortage yet. If the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen soon, Brent and U.S. crude will ultimately reprice higher. That suggests the real oil crisis has not even reached Western markets fully yet.
And European gas futures surged as much as 35% to more than double their pre-war level. And European diesel futures topped $190 a barrel at one point on Wednesday. Now that underscores the wider inflationary risks from the conflict.
As the oil rally extended, global markets took a beating on Wednesday with a deep sell-off across markets. Bonds, stocks, cryptos and precious metals fell sharply.
About $3 trillion were wiped out from precious metals as gold crashed below $4,550 and silver dumped below $70. Gold was down nearly 7%, wiping out $2.36 trillion in market value. Silver was down over 13%, wiping out $580 billion.
The Iran war has boosted oil and gas prices in recent weeks, raising concerns among economists that a U.S. recession may be coming if energy costs remain elevated for an extended period.
Now we decode that and more in the next report. Take a look at it.
The chances of the United States going into a recession have risen. That reflects growing concerns regarding the economic fallout from geopolitical uncertainty, rising oil prices and slowing job growth. Economists have become more uncertain about the global economic outlook since the US and Israel struck Iran last month. The uncertainty has stoked fears that a disrupted global oil supply would raise and prolong inflation in the US. That would potentially deter the Federal Reserve from cutting inflation rates. On Wednesday, the Fed kept rates unchanged for the second time in a row and warned of the uncertainty from the Iran war. The probability of a recession over the next 12 months jumped to nearly 49% in February, the highest since the 2020 pandemic. The percentage has risen 15 percentage points over the last 6 months. This is based on the leading economic indicator invented by Moody's. The calculation uses extensive economic data and a machine learning model. The recent surge was primarily driven by the deteriorating job market. with nearly all economic data softening since the end of 2025. Historically, such a high probability has never been reported outside of recessions. Now, with oil prices surging in March, the indicator is expected to breach the key 50% threshold. Every recession since World War II, except the pandemic, was preceded by a spike in oil prices. The longer oil prices remained elevated, the higher the chance of an economic downturn. Moody's chief economist Mark Zandi noted that a recession is once again a serious threat. Goldman Sachs has raised its 12-month recession probability to 25% after a weak February jobs report and rising oil prices. Wells Fargo, Oxford Economics and Vanguard say higher oil prices in the range of $130 and $150 per barrel would increase the risk of a recession. While Brent crude has surged over 40% since the war to trade at around $103 a barrel, it is below recent highs. Betting platform Kalshi has raised its probability of a recession to 32.4%. Polymarket currently has a 31% chance of a recession in the US before the end of 2026, down slightly from 35% over the weekend. Energy prices tied to West Asia supply risks will remain a key swing factor for inflation and policy, with any disruptions likely to raise near-term recession odds. Business Bureau WION, World is One.
The US and UK audiences can now cast a Ukrainian crime drama titled Double Stakes.
The mini-series starring Vlad Nikityuk is set in Kiev and dives into the gritty overlap between organized crime and law enforcement.
Now, Nikityuk plays the role of Igor Shvedov, a soldier who returns home to tragedy as his brother is killed right in front of him. Driven by revenge, Igor uses his training as an army investigator to outsmart both the mob and the police. While to prepare for the role, the actor trained extensively. He worked with a boxing coach and also learned gun handling to make the action feel more real on screen. The series is now being released in the UK and the US. It was originally shot in 2021 before being picked up and aired in Ukraine. Nikityuk shares he's glad that the show is finally reaching a global audience.
We shot this project in 21, you know about this, yeah? So it was before the full-scale war happened in Ukraine, yeah? So many things were changed, yeah? And if we would shoot this film in this period of time during the full-scale war, you understand, yeah? It would be another movie. It would be another story.
He adds that things would be very different if the show was made today. With the war in Ukraine, both the story and the way it is told would have changed significantly. Despite the challenges, Nikityuk believes storytelling still matters, especially during difficult times. He says entertainment continues to play an important role, even in the middle of conflict.
All right, with that, we call a wrap to World Day for today. News and updates will follow on the other side. Keep watching WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power. Only on WION. World is one.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.